3:01 a.m. Some say this is the dead hour. Others call it the devil's hour, and I've never really cared about the terminology. To me, it's always just been another time on the clock, another point in my night shift. Until that night. The morgue was in complete silence. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels too full of stagnant air, of stories that don't move, of presences that don't need a form. I know every sound in this building, the heavy hum of the cold chamber compressor, the distant click of the water heater, the old wood of the main hallway creaking when the temperature changes. But at 3 a.m., the most common sound is silence. And that night, that silence seemed to be watching me. Mr. H, 71 years old, had been ready since the end of the previous night. A retired farmer, his hands marked by a lifetime of planting, harvesting, and fixing what broke. His daughter brought the grey-blue shirt and asked. He liked this one, said it brings him luck. Luck is asked for by those who no longer need it. I prepared him carefully, shaved, hair combed back in a traditional cut, hands crossed over his abdomen, his face resting at an angle that wouldn't disturb the memory. I closed the cold chamber door at 11:47 p.m., the seal placed, signature on the clipboard. Everything as per protocol. In the office, minimal paperwork, a cold cup of coffee from the end of my shift and some forms for the morning. I was alone. I like the night shift because it gives me this kind of ordered solitude. Sometimes that same solitude becomes a test. When I looked up at the hallway clock, an oval one inherited from my grandfather, too old to be accurate, I saw 3 a.m. staring back. I know it's unreliable. It runs fast or slow, stops without warning. But at that hour it was right, and a chill ran through me telling me to trust it. That's when I heard it. A sound coming from inside the cold chamber. Not loud, not urgent, low, dense, like a deep sigh in my ear. The kind of sound you shouldn't hear coming from a body that no longer breathes. And before my mind could make any excuses, something else came, crossing the hallway and entering me. A hoarse voice, consumed by something beyond time, saying my name. I stood up slowly. I didn't run. In my line of work, running is for fires or medical emergencies. I stood up as if checking a trivial detail, but my fingers were cold. I crossed the hallway, counting the steps in my head. With each step, my brain tried to stack rational justifications. The compressor mechanism, resonance, water in the pipes. But deep down, none of those sounds spoke your name. The cold chamber door was intact, the seal was firm. I pressed my ear to it. Complete silence. Not the heavy silence from before, a silence that seemed to be holding something behind it, as if waiting for a moment to spill over. I stood there, motionless, feeling the cold pass from the door into my skin. I took a deep breath, stepped back. I forced myself to leave. I returned to the office, but the air felt dense, heavy. No matter what I tried to read or review, my attention kept being pulled toward that hallway. At 3:04 a.m., I already knew I would return. From where I sat, I could see the start of the chapel hallway, a rectangular shadow cut by the faint glow of an emergency light. The light flickered almost imperceptibly, as if it were breathing. That image pulled from me an old memory. My father telling me that during the night the house changes its language. I never fully understood it, but I always knew when it happened. Mr. H wasn't a stranger to me. I knew him by sight from the town fair. He was the kind of man who would hold the door for anyone, who would offer the last orange at the stall if he saw a child eyeing it with longing. Simple people with solid gestures. In the preparation room earlier, I remember feeling something different. While adjusting the cuff of the shirt over his thin forearm, I noticed that his hand, though lifeless, had a peculiar weight, as if it were holding onto one last job to do. I placed the photograph as requested by the family at his feet. An old image of a barbecue in the backyard, a red cap, the grandson sitting on his lap. The smile was broad, but the eyes held something. At 3:07 a.m., another sound. Not my name, but something like a long grumble, a vocal scratch hard to decipher. I stood up. I went halfway down the hallway. I stopped and listened. The light flickered again, this time brighter. I went back to get the keys to the cold chamber. In the meantime, I mentally noted every detail. Door intact, seal whole, stable temperature. In the preparation room, something caught my attention. One of the steel trays was too far forward on the counter. I didn't remember leaving it like that. I pushed it back until I heard the metallic click. In the clean reflection of the surface, my face looked distorted. The kind of distortion that doesn't come from dirt or the metal. It comes from shadow. The silence that followed was abnormal. In the morgue, silence is usually a constant noise. Machines, systems. In that moment, even the compressor seemed to hold its breath. I was torn between opening the cold chamber and following the protocols. There's a fine line between being cautious and transgressing. Opening without justification disrespects the dead and alarms the family. But with each passing minute, I felt that something was happening intentionally, as if someone or something was trying to take command. I spoke through the door. "Mr. H, what do you need?" My voice sounded strange in the narrow space between me and the metal. It stayed there. The words didn't find an echo. Then, from inside, I heard the dull sound of something moving. Millimeters, slight, just enough for the ear to catch and the body to freeze. When I returned to the office, I noticed the smell, not of disinfectant, not of old flowers, the smell of cheap talcum powder, like a towel stored with care. It's impossible not to associate smells with memories. That one was part of my childhood. It was the kind of detail the family could have brought with his clothes. Still, I felt like it was intentional. At 3:12 a.m. I decided. I took the seal cutter and went back down the hallway. I cut the seal slowly. I wanted to avoid any sharp noise. The door opened with the soft sigh of the seal releasing. The internal light blinded me for a moment, overwhelming white against cold curves. The body was perfect, exactly as I left it. Except for the photograph, it was no longer at his feet. Now it rested on his chest, beneath his crossed hands. And the back, previously clean, had one word written in pencil, firmly: "Stay." I placed the photo back at his feet and lightly touched the shelf lining, as if searching for something hidden. Silence. And that's when the second call came. My name, plus 2 words. Low, but clear. "Don't go." I stepped back. I felt that somehow he didn't want, or couldn't be left alone. I stayed. I leaned against the side of the chamber, breathing in that space. "I'll stay until you rest." I didn't expect an answer, but the air changed. It became less heavy, less dense. For the next 10 minutes, I stayed present, listening to the hum return to its normal rhythm. It was as if the whole building had returned to its original language. At 3:27 a.m., the feeling ended. Cold, just the cold of machinery. I placed the photograph back at his feet, sealed it again, and wrote clearly on the clipboard. Before turning off the lights, I touched the door and said, "See you tomorrow." The next morning, the family arrived early, everything in its place. The wake went as expected. But when I handed the photograph to the daughter, I noticed the back was clean again. I showed it to her, asking if she had written something there. "No," she replied, confused. "But stay." That's what he would say when he didn't want us to leave. Since that night, when the clock approaches 3:00 a.m. and I'm alone, I say my name softly before someone else does it for me. And I ask the air, do you need me to stay? Sometimes it feels like it does. If you were alone at 3 a.m. with a body calling your name and asking you not to leave, would you stay? Write the word "stay" in the comments. And subscribe to the channel, share and like so we can continue bringing stories that only the silence of those who have gone can tell us.